Hello, Heidi Lynn from Harnessing Life here. This next set of videos, I'm going to be focusing on how to heal from various aspects of trauma. Now, each day thus far, I've been focusing on a different type of trauma, and so for these next videos, I'm just going to pick one way that you can heal or use to heal from these types of traumas. There are many different ways, there's many different approaches, every person is different and every situation is different, so there's no way I can cover that in one video. But today, because it's the day for emotional abuse, I'm going to talk about triggers and a way in which you can start the healing process for triggers. So a trigger, just to be clear, I talked about triggers a couple of weeks ago, and how they are emotional memories that we've attached to a certain instance, a certain memory, a certain thing. So it could be a food or a name or anything. When you have triggers, I know a lot of people tend to avoid their triggers or want to avoid them, but it's really important to know what triggers you. It's imperative that you take note and be aware, because if you just avoid them all the time, you're not going to be able to heal from them, and you will continually have these triggers over and over and over again for the rest of your life. Nobody wants that. It's not good for you, it's not healthy, it's not good for everyone around you. It makes you a very sensitive person, or seem like a very sensitive or easily offended person. And there are ways that you can heal from these triggers, and there are ways, if it's something that's really, really deep and maybe it doesn't seem like you can heal from it right away, there's also ways that you can communicate with others to let them know that this thing triggers you. And I'll be talking about that a little bit more next week when we talk about stopping the cycle. But for now, today, we're going to talk about triggers. Now, there's lots of different ways to heal from triggers specifically. I came up with one word that helped me with one of mine, and I'll talk a little bit more about that towards the end. But the word is attract. Now, you can decide what you want to attract. Are you attracting good vibes? Are you attracting positive people? Are you attracting healing? Whatever you want to attract to help you remember this. But that's the word. So it goes like this. The first letter is A, and that goes with to be aware. Okay, so you have to be aware of what the trigger is. When you're triggered by something, just take a step back and say, oh, okay, that really triggered me. Or, oh, that made me feel really uncomfortable. That felt like a trigger. Write it down, okay? So that you can remember it. The next letter is T, and that goes with the word trace. Now, I use that to trace it back. So when you're dealing with a trigger, it always stems from somewhere. So you've got to be able to figure out where it's coming from so that you can figure out the emotions behind it, because it's really hard to unpack all the emotions that are kind of pent up and been pent up for years, especially those of us who have had trauma from their childhood. It can be really deep and it can be really complex. So try to trace it back, and it might take a little while. You can, ask yourself questions like, why is this so triggering? What might have happened that caused this? Think back in your mind's eye, do some introspection, and try to get closer to where it originated. Then, if we're going with the word attract, the next letter is T again. And I have that as truth, okay? So you're aware of it, you trace it back, and maybe you realize, so let's say your trigger is that somebody says you can't do that. Maybe that's your trigger. So you trace it back and you realize, I'm triggered by that because my parents used to say that to me all the time. And that makes me very angry. I'm angry at the fact that people think I can't do that. Okay? Now, you have to set the truth. So the truth is, I can. Okay? If the trigger is I can't, you have to remember, okay, well, what's the truth about that? Really, I can. There's no reason I can't. I'm just being told that and I'm angry about it. So write the truth statement down. I can do XYZ if it's a specific thing, or I can. And that's something that you can use when you are triggered to say to yourself, whoa, hold on, I'm getting really uncomfortable, or I'm getting really afraid, or I'm getting whatever emotion the trigger brings out in you. I'm feeling XYZ. And that's not true. Like, this trigger is false. It's based on fear, or it's based on anger. And the truth of it is, I can. Okay, you kind of have to go through this process in your mind, and at first it's not comfortable to do, and it takes a while, but you can get there. Okay, so A is aware, T is to trace, the next T is truth, the next letter is R, and for that I have rewire. Now, when you're rewiring something in your brain, you have to be able to make sense of it, to find out what the truth is, which is what you're doing, right, on this path that you're taking through this journey of attract. And as you are aware of it, as you are tracing it back, as you are figuring out the truth of it, the next logical step happens to be rewire. It does it as you're doing those things. It's kind of one of those, you don't really have to think about it as much, but if you intentionally take the time to work through each of these steps, you are starting to rewire your brain to be able to realize, oh, that was false. This idea I had before was false, and now here's the truth. And instead of going to this false feeling, or this real emotion for this false statement, then I'm just gonna let it go, and I'm gonna go to this true statement and this other emotion, because I know that this is false. Okay, so that's the rewiring that happens. And the last three letters are a word, ACT, act. Okay, because sometimes in the beginning, especially when you're going through this process, you kind of just have to act like it's working. You know, because in the beginning it's not going to feel like it's working. It's going to feel uncomfortable, and it's going to feel weird, and it's going to feel false because you've believed this false statement for a long time, which leads to the anger or resentment or bitterness or fear, and that leads to the trigger. So in the beginning, you might just have to act like it really works. And eventually, your brain will rewire, and it will really realize that it is a false statement and that you are moving towards a true statement, but you have to find out what that true statement is so that you can move towards that. So that's what helped me attract, ATTRACT. Now, one personal example, just really quick. When I first got married, my husband he's a runner, so he would ask me to run with him. I hate running. I hate it with a passion. And so, but me being lovey-dovey, I thought, oh, well, I'll try. So I did, and I hated it. So I would get all grumpy, and I would go really slow, and he'd try to encourage me, and he'd say things like, come on, you can do it, you can do it. And that was a trigger for me. I hated that, and I hated when he said that. Literally one day I just turned to him and I said, will you just shut up? I do not like it when you say that. Don't encourage me. If you have something to say, don't make it encouragement. And he was taken aback, I'm just trying to be nice. Anyways, fast forward many years, I've start becoming a life coach and learning about all this triggering and stuff, and realize that, oh, that was a trigger because, as a child, I learned that encouragement makes you weak. And so I felt like if I was accepting encouragement from other people, then I must be a weak person, because that's what I was taught as a child. So, you know, I worked through this whole attract thing and found that obviously it's not true. And I really had to focus on certain things during this process, at least for me personally. When someone said something encouraging, at first, I was, you know, I had that feeling in my stomach like, oh, I hate that. But I really focused on just saying thank you. That's it. And at first, it was probably not very sincere. You know, thanks. But as, you know, as I got more into this process and realized that I'm not a weak person for accepting encouragement. People, they're just trying to be nice and they're just trying to be sincere. It's okay to sincerely accept encouragement. Then, you know, I got to the point where I was sincerely saying, well, thank you. I appreciate that. And I would add things to say, like, I appreciate that. Or, oh, that's so thoughtful of you to think of me. Or that's so thoughtful, or that's so considerate of you. And that has really helped me to rewire my brain as far as that trigger goes, that I can accept encouragement. And that is the true statement. It's not that, you know, people aren't trying to make me weak or aren't trying to make me feel weak, which were the false statements that I believed before the fact. And now I can accept encouragement, and it's even easier to give encouragement. So I now want to encourage you to work on your triggers. You know, try not to get angry when people trigger you, because often they don't realize it. Now, in a narcissistic or toxic relationship, this may be a different story as far as when you're working with that particular person or people. They're not necessarily so sincere. But people in the outside world who are friends, who are just trying to be encouraging, maybe they don't know what to say, then you can go through this process with your triggers and learn how to heal your own triggers. And next week I'm going to be talking about how to communicate with them. If it's a trigger that's just really deep and takes a long time to heal, it's okay, but you can talk with them and let them know how they can help you in that process. So that's next week's video. But in the meantime, I also want to encourage you to check out Living Intentionally Tribe, because this is what we can talk about within that tribe. We can go a little more deep. We can even work on it together. And it's a really great experience to have other people who are there to support and who know what you're going through and know how to work with you to overcome whatever your goals are. So I hope you learned something in this video, and I hope you liked it. Please feel free to like the video or share it so that we can spread awareness together. And take care. I'll see you in the next video.